2 days after I signed the check for my son James' wedding, a check for $250,000, the manager of the reception venue called me. His voice was shaking. "Mr. Harrington," he whispered, "you need to come down here." We were reviewing the security tapes from the VIP room. "You need to see this yourself. Come alone. And whatever you do, do not tell your wife." I stared at the phone, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. What I saw on that screen an hour later wasn't just a family secret. It was a death sentence signed by the 3 people I loved most in this world. Before I tell you what I did to make them pay, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you have ever trusted the wrong person. My name is William Harrington. Everyone calls me Bill. I am 70 years old, and I spent 40 years building a logistics empire from a single truck to a fleet that crosses continents. I thought I knew how to spot a liar. I thought I knew how to calculate risk. I was wrong. The biggest risk was sleeping in the bed next to me. It was a Tuesday morning in the Hamptons. The air was crisp, the kind of morning that usually makes you glad to be alive, but I felt terrible. My head was swimming in a thick gray fog. My limbs felt heavy, like I was moving through waist-deep water. I sat at the marble island in our kitchen, staring at a cup of black coffee I didn't have the energy to lift. I attributed it to the wedding hangover. At 70, you do not bounce back from champagne and late nights the way you used to. Or at least that is what my wife Catherine kept telling me. "You are just tired, Bill," she had said that morning, patting my shoulder with a hand that felt more patronizing than affectionate. "You are getting older. You need to rest more. Let me handle the finances for a while. You just relax, relax." That word had been coming up a lot lately, along with forgetful and confused. Catherine had been subtly planting those seeds for months, telling our friends at the country club that I was repeating stories, telling the doctor I was mixing up dates. I had started to believe her. I felt fuzzy. I felt slow. I thought it was just time taking its toll. Then the phone rang. It was Giovanni, the manager of the Gilded Fork, the exclusive restaurant where we had held the reception. Giovanni was a good man, an old-school professional who valued discretion above all else. He had managed my company dinners for 20 years. He knew me. "Mr. Harrington." Giovanni said, and the tremor in his voice cut through my mental fog like a siren. "I am sorry to disturb you so early, but we were doing the post-event security audit. I saw something on the camera in the private suite, the room where you went to rest after the toasts." I rubbed my temples, trying to focus. "Did I lose something, Giovanni? Is it my watch?" "No, sir," he replied, his voice dropping to a hush. "It is not what you lost. It is what was done to you. Please, sir, get in your car. Come to the back entrance. Do not bring Mrs. Harrington. Do not bring your son. You need to see this alone." The urgency in his tone triggered an instinct I hadn't used since my days in the boardroom. The fog didn't lift, but the adrenaline pushed it aside. I stood up. "Who was that, darling?" Catherine asked, walking into the kitchen. She was wearing a silk robe, looking every bit the queen of the manor I had bought for her. She was my second wife, 10 years my junior, sharp, elegant, and lately incredibly insist on managing my estate planning. "Just the golf club," I lied. My voice sounded steady, a miracle given how much my hands were shaking. "They mixed up a tea time. I need to go straighten it out." Catherine frowned, her eyes scanning my face. "You really shouldn't be driving, Bill. You have been so dizzy lately. James can drive you later." "No," I said, grabbing my keys. "The fresh air will do me good. I will be back for lunch." I walked out before she could argue. As I drove the winding roads toward the restaurant, my mind raced. What could be on that tape? Did I fall? Did I embarrass myself? I tried to remember the wedding night. It was a blur. I remembered the toast. I I remembered James looking handsome but nervous in his tuxedo. I remembered Vanessa, my new daughter-in-law, looking at the diamond necklace I had given her, not with gratitude, but with the hunger of an appraiser. And then I remembered feeling incredibly tired, so tired I had to go lie down in the private suite. I pulled into the rear lot of the Gilded Fork. Giovanni was waiting by the service door. He looked pale. He didn't offer a handshake, just nodded, and led me through the bustling kitchen down a narrow hallway and into the security office. It was a small, windowless room lit only by the glow of monitors. "Sit down, Mr. Harrington," Giovanni said, pulling out a chair. "I have queued up the footage. This is from Saturday night, roughly 9:30 p.m. You had just gone into the suite to lie down." He pressed play. On the screen, I saw myself stumbling into the room, loosening my tie and collapsing onto the leather sofa. I looked drunk, but I knew I had only had 2 glasses of wine. I watched myself pass out almost immediately. Then the door opened. Catherine walked in. She checked the hallway to make sure no one was watching, then closed the door. James and Vanessa followed her. They didn't look worried about my health. They didn't look like a loving family checking on a tired patriarch. They looked like predators circling a wounded animal. On the screen, Catherine stood over me, waving a hand in front of my face. I didn't move. She turned to the others and laughed. A cold, sharp laugh that I couldn't hear but could see in the throw of her head. Then the moment that stopped my heart. Vanessa, my beautiful 28-year-old daughter-in-law, the woman who had cried tears of joy when I welcomed her to the family, reached into her clutch. She pulled out a small glass vial. It wasn't insulin. It wasn't aspirin. It was an unmarked dropper bottle. She walked over to the side table where a carafe of water and a glass sat. She poured water into the glass. Then carefully, methodically, she squeezed 3 distinct drops of liquid from the vial into the water. She swirled it around. Catherine watched her, nodding in approval. Giovanni turned up the volume. The audio was grainy but clear enough. "Are you sure that is enough?" Catherine asked. Her voice was calm, businesslike. "It is plenty," Vanessa replied. Her voice was different than the sweet tone she used with me. It was hard, sharp. "This is the new blend. It is a high-dose sedative mixed with a mild hallucinogen. It will not just knock him out. It will scramble his neural pathways for the next 48 hours. When he wakes up, he won't know what day it is. He will be slurring his words. He will look exactly like a man with rapid onset dementia." James, my son, my only child, was standing by the door, wringing his hands. He looked pale. "Mom, Van, is this safe? What if his heart stops?" Vanessa turned on him, her face twisting into a sneer. She reached out and slapped his cheek lightly, but with infinite contempt. "Stop being a coward, James," she hissed. "You want the lifestyle, right? You want the penthouse. You want the cars. Your father is tightening the purse strings. He is talking about charity foundations. If we do not get that power of attorney signed next week, we get nothing. We get an allowance. I did not marry you for an allowance." "But what if he dies?" James whimpered. Catherine stepped forward. She placed a hand on James' face, a gesture that looked maternal, but was pure manipulation. "If he dies, darling, then our problems are solved even faster," she said. My blood ran cold. I sat in that dark security room staring at the woman I had shared a bed with for 15 years. She wasn't just greedy. She was discussing my death as a convenient administrative shortcut. "If he dies," Catherine continued, looking back at my unconscious body on the sofa, "then the trust fund unlocks immediately. We don't have to wait for the competency hearings. We don't have to deal with doctors. $50 million, James. Yours, mine, immediately. So if his heart stops, it stops. It is nature taking its course." Vanessa smiled. It was a wolfish, hungry smile. She handed the poisoned water to Catherine. "Make sure he drinks it when he wakes up. Tell him it is for the dehydration." I watched the screen as Catherine took the glass. The video fast-forwarded. I saw myself waking up groggy on the tape. I saw Catherine holding the glass to my lips playing the devoted wife. I saw myself drinking it, drinking the poison they had prepared for me. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I thought I would be sick right there on the floor. The dizziness I had felt this morning, the brain fog, the heaviness, it wasn't age. It wasn't wine. I was being drugged. I was being systematically poisoned by my own family to make me look incompetent so they could seize control of my empire. Giovanni stopped the tape. The room fell silent. The hum of the computer fans sounded like a roar in my ears. "Mr. Harrington," Giovanni said softly. I kept the glass. I looked up at him. "What?" When I went in to clear the room the next morning, I found the glass. It still had a little liquid in it. I thought it looked strange there was a residue. I didn't wash it. I put it in a Ziploc bag. I have it in the safe. I looked at this man, this restaurant manager, who I had tipped well but never truly known, and I felt a surge of gratitude that almost brought me to tears. He had done what my own son hadn't. He had protected me. "Give it to me," I said. My voice was different now. The fog was still there, but piercing through it was a cold, hard rage. It was the voice I used when I was crushing a competitor or firing a corrupt executive. Giovanni opened the safe and handed me a plastic bag containing the highball glass. I could see a faint, oily film on the surface of the remaining water. "Thank you, Giovanni," I said, taking the bag. "You have saved my life. I will never forget this. But I need you to do one more thing for me. Anything, Mr. Harrington. Delete this footage from the main server," I said. "Copy it onto a flash drive for me, and then wipe it from the system. If they come back, if they ask to see the tapes, tell them the cameras were malfunctioning. Tell them nothing exists. But sir, if we delete it, they cannot know I cut him off. If they know I have seen this, they will change tactics. They might try something more direct. They might try to finish the job before I can stop them. I need them to think I am the confused, sick old man they created. I need them to think they are winning." Giovanni nodded slowly, understanding the game. "I will handle it, sir." I took the flash drive and the bag with the glass. I walked out to my car, the mid-morning sun blinding me. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My son. My wife. My daughter-in-law. They wanted to declare me mentally incompetent. They wanted to stick me in a home drugged out of my mind while they spent the fortune I had built with 40 years of sweat and stress. They were willing to kill me for it. I looked at my phone. There were 3 missed calls from Catherine. She was probably tracking my phone location. She was probably wondering why I was at the restaurant and not the golf course. I needed a plan. I couldn't go home yet. I couldn't look them in the face without exploding, and if I exploded now, I would lose the advantage. I needed to know exactly what was in my system. I needed to secure my assets. I needed a lawyer who was more shark than human. I started the car and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. It was the personal line of Marcus Blackwood. Blackwood wasn't a family lawyer. He was a corporate litigator, a man known in New York as the Grim Reaper. He destroyed companies for a living. He didn't have a heart, but he had a brilliant mind, and he owed me a favor. "Blackwood," I said when he answered. "It is Bill Harrington. I need you to clear your schedule." Bill Blackwood's voice was smooth like gravel in oil. "It has been a while. I am in the middle of a merger." "Cancel it," I said. "I have a job for you. It is not a merger. It is a demolition. I need to meet you at your private clinic. I need a full toxicology screen, blood and hair. And then I need you to draft some papers." "Toxicology?" Blackwood paused. "Who are we targeting, Bill?" "My family," I said. "I want to destroy them, Marcus. I want to leave them with nothing but the clothes on their backs and a prison sentence. Can you handle that?" I could hear the smile in his voice. I will see you in an hour, Bill. I hung up the phone and pulled out of the parking lot. As I drove, I rehearsed my role. I had to go back to that house. I had to walk through that door and pretend to be the confused, stumbling old man they wanted me to be. I had to drink their soup and smile at their lies. I had to let them think they were the predators. They had no idea. They had forgotten who I was. They thought I was just a checkbook. They forgot I was the man who negotiated with unions in the 80s, who broke strikes, who swallowed competitors whole. I wasn't the prey. I was the trap. And they had just walked right into me. I drove to Blackwood's private medical facility first. It was discreet, expensive, and completely off the books. The doctors took my blood. They took the glass with the oily residue. They told me they would have a preliminary analysis in 4 hours. While they drew my blood, I sat with Blackwood. He was a thin man with eyes like flint. He listened to my story without blinking. He watched the footage on the laptop. When Vanessa slapped James, Blackwood actually chuckled. "Charming girl," he said. "So what is the play, Bill? Divorce? Disownment?" "No," I said. "That is too easy. If I divorce Catherine now, she gets half. She will argue she was a faithful wife and I am paranoid. If I disown James, he will contest the will, claiming I am senile, and with the drugs in my system, he might win. I need them to do something undeniable. I need them to sign their own confessions." Blackwood leaned back, steepling his fingers. "You want to bait them?" "I want to give them exactly what they want," I said. "They want control. They want the empire. They want the $50 million. I am going to give it to them." "You are going to give it to them?" Blackwood asked, raising an eyebrow. "I am going to hand them the keys to the kingdom," I said. "I am going to sign a document giving them full control over the family trust, effective immediately." "Bill, have you lost your mind? That is financial suicide." "Read the fine print, Marcus," I said. "I want you to draft a special trust agreement. It will look standard. It will give them control of the assets. But I want a clause buried in the addendums. A clause that states that any proven criminal activity, any fraud, or any physical harm done to the grantor automatically revokes the trust and triggers a transfer of all assets to a holding company controlled by you. And I want a clause that says by signing they accept full criminal liability for the management of the funds and the care of the grantor." Blackwood smiled. It was a terrifying sight. "You want to trap them in a fraud charge?" "Better," I said. "Once they sign that paper, they will think they have won. They will get sloppy. They will stop hiding their tracks. And when the toxicology report comes back proving they have been poisoning me, that signature won't just cost them the money. It will be proof of premeditation. It will turn a family dispute into a federal RICO case. They signed a contract to take care of me while poisoning me. That is malice aforethought." "I like it," Blackwood said. "It is cruel. They tried to erase my mind." "Marcus," I said, standing up, "cruelty is the only language they understand." I left the clinic and drove home. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn of my estate. I saw James' car in the driveway. He was back early. They were gathering. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired, which was good. I let my shoulders slump. I relaxed my facial muscles to look vacant. I practiced a slight tremor in my left hand. I walked up the steps to the front door. I took a deep breath of the cool evening air. It would be the last clean breath I would take for a while. Inside, the air was thick with lies. I opened the door. Bill Catherine called out from the living room. Her voice was sharp, accusatory. "Where have you been? We have been worried sick." She walked into the foyer, flanked by James and Vanessa. They looked like a tribunal. I blinked, looking around the room as if I didn't recognize it. I let a little fear creep into my eyes. I don't know," I stammered, letting my voice quaver. "I went to the golf course, but I couldn't find my clubs. Did I leave them here?" I watched them exchange glances. Catherine looked at Vanessa. A small, triumphant smile touched the corner of her mouth. It was working. They bought it. "You didn't take your clubs, Bill," Catherine said, her voice shifting to a fake, soothing coo. "You left them in the garage." "Oh, honey, you are really getting confused. Come sit down." She took my arm. Her touch made my skin crawl, but I leaned into her, letting her support my weight. "I feel so heavy," I murmured. "It is okay, Dad," James said. He wouldn't look me in the eye. "We are here. We will take care of you." "Yes," Vanessa added, walking up to me. She placed a hand on my forehead. "You are burning up. You need fluids. I made you some special soup. It will make you feel better." Special soup. I knew exactly what that meant. More sedative. More hallucinogen. "That sounds nice," I said weakly. "I am so lucky to have you all." I let them lead me to the couch. I let them fuss over me. I watched Vanessa go to the kitchen to fetch the poison. I sat there, a wolf in sheep's clothing, and I waited. The game had begun. The foyer of my own home felt like a foreign country, a cold, marble-floored embassy where I no longer held diplomatic immunity. I stood there for a moment, my hand still resting on the brass doorknob, taking a breath that rattled slightly in my chest. It wasn't a performance yet. The exhaustion was real. The sheer mental weight of knowing that the woman waiting in the living room had tried to erase my mind was heavier than any cargo container my ships had ever carried across the Atlantic. I looked at the grand staircase, the crystal chandelier, the family portraits on the wall, where everyone was smiling, frozen in a lie. I had paid for the frame, the paint, the wall, and the smile. Now I had to pay for the truth. I shuffled my feet, scuffing the expensive rug intentionally. I let my shoulders drop, hunching forward just enough to shrink my 6-foot frame. I relaxed the muscles around my mouth, letting my jaw go slack. I wasn't Bill Harrington, the CEO who crushed unions and negotiated treaties. I was Bill, the confused old man who needed a nap. Catherine appeared from the living room before I could even take my coat off. She moved with a predator's grace, holding a glass of white wine on her eyes, sharp and assessing. She didn't look relieved to see me. She looked annoyed, like a project manager whose timeline had just been disrupted. "Where have you been, Bill?" she asked. Her voice was loud, too loud for the quiet house. It was a stage whisper meant to carry. "We have been worried sick. You said you would be back for lunch. It is nearly dinner time." "Look at you. You are a mess." I blinked rapidly, looking past her shoulder, focusing on nothing. I let my hands tremble as I reached for the coat rack and missed. I don't know," I stammered, letting the words slur together. I was driving. But then the road looked different. I think I went to the club, but no one was there. "Catherine, why was no one there?" I watched her face closely. For a microsecond, there was a flicker of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. It was the look of a gambler who just saw the dealer bust. She didn't offer to take my coat. She took a sip of her wine, hiding a smirk behind the crystal rim. She turned her head slightly, shouting toward the living room, where the blue light of a television flickered. "James, did you hear that? Your father doesn't know where he has been for 6 hours." I shuffled into the living room. My son, my 32-year-old heir, was sprawled on the Italian leather sofa, a game controller in his hands. He was killing zombies on a screen, ignoring the murder happening in his own hallway. He paused the game and looked up. His eyes were glassy, probably from the weed he thought I didn't know he smoked in the pool house. "He is getting worse, Mom," James said, shaking his head with a theatrical sadness that made my stomach turn. "He looks totally out of it." Catherine walked over to me, placing a hand on my arm. Her grip was tight, pinching the skin. It wasn't a caress. It was a restraint. Bill, look at me, she said, speaking slowly and enunciating every syllable as if I were a toddler or an idiot. You didn't go to the club. The club is closed on Tuesdays. We told you that this morning. Don't you remember? I shook my head, letting a look of panic enter my eyes. It wasn't hard to summon the fear. The fear was real, but it wasn't about the club. It was about how easily they were doing this. Closed, I whispered. No, I saw the greens. You are hallucinating again, Catherine said loudly. She looked at James and winked, a distinct, deliberate wink. Then she turned back to me, her voice dripping with fake concern. Just like yesterday, Bill. Do you remember yesterday? I stared at her blankly. I knew exactly what happened yesterday. I had spent the day in my study reviewing quarterly reports, but I knew she was about to rewrite history. I worked yesterday, I said weakly. Catherine laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. Worked? Honey, you haven't worked in months. Yesterday you went out to the front lawn in your pajamas. You flagged down a stranger's car. You tried to sell them the house bill. You tried to sign the deed over on a napkin for $10,000. My blood boiled. It was a lie so audacious, so humiliating, that I almost broke character. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and scream that I was sharper than she would ever be. I wanted to tell her I knew she had forged my signature on the real estate listing I found in her desk. But I swallowed the rage. I let it burn a hole in my gut and fuel my performance. I did not. I whimpered, backing away from her. I wouldn't sell the house. You don't remember, Catherine sighed, looking at James. See, this is what Dr. Aris was talking about. The aggression, the denial. He warned us about this. He said, when the dementia sets in, he will start making up stories. He will start getting defensive. Dr. Aris. The name landed like a punch. Dr. Aris was our neighbor, a retired cardiologist, the head of the Homeowners Association. He was influential. If Catherine had been feeding him these lies, if she had been telling the whole neighborhood that I was wandering lawns and selling houses on napkins, then my reputation was already dead. She hadn't just started this plot. She had been laying the groundwork for months, painting me as a senile old fool at every cocktail party and bridge game I hadn't attended. She was isolating me. She was destroying my credibility so that when I finally screamed for help, everyone would just nod and say, "Poor Bill, he has lost his mind." I sank onto the ottoman, burying my face in my hands. I wasn't hiding tears. I was hiding the look of pure hatred that I knew was burning in my eyes. I am sorry, I mumbled into my palms. I am so confused. It is okay, Dad, James said, not moving from the couch. Mom can handle it. You should just sign the papers she has. It will be easier. You won't have to worry about the house or the money anymore. Just sign the papers. The greed was so naked, so impatient. They didn't even wait for the body to get cold. They didn't even wait for the mind to fully break. Catherine sat next to me, the smell of her expensive perfume cloying and suffocating. She rubbed my back. James is right, sweetie, she cooed. You are stressed. You are trying to hold on to too much. You almost sold the house to a stranger. Think of the liability. Think of the embarrassment. We just want to protect you. We want to make sure you don't hurt yourself or anyone else. She leaned in close, her lips brushing my ear. Her voice dropped to a whisper that James couldn't hear, a whisper that carried the true venom of her soul. You are losing it, old man. You are slipping away. Soon you won't even remember your own name. And frankly, it is a relief. You have been a burden for a long time. I shivered. It was the reaction she wanted. She interpreted it as fear, as weakness. She stood up, triumphant. I am going to have Vanessa bring you something to eat, she announced, clapping her hands together like a schoolteacher dismissing a class. She made a special soup. It will help you sleep. You need sleep, Bill. A long, deep sleep. She walked toward the kitchen, her hips swaying, confident that she had won. James went back to his video game, the sounds of digital gunfire filling the room. I sat alone in the center of my empire, a king playing the fool, waiting for the poison to be served. I watched James' thumbs move over the controller, destroying pixelated enemies, completely unaware that the man sitting behind him was about to delete his entire future. The gaslighting was over. The war had begun. The dining room was a cavern of shadows, illuminated only by the dim glow of the crystal chandelier that I had imported from Italy 30 years ago. It was a room built for feasts, for Thanksgiving laughter, for closing deals over aged scotch. Now it felt like an execution chamber. I sat at the head of the table, my usual spot, but I felt small in the high-backed chair. I kept my posture slumped, my hands resting on the polished wood with a deliberate tremor. I had to look like a man whose empire was crumbling along with his mind. Vanessa entered from the kitchen carrying a silver tray. She walked with a confident, rhythmic click of her heels against the parquet floor. She was wearing an apron over her designer dress, a prop to sell the image of the caring daughter-in-law, but her eyes were cold, calculating flint. On the tray sat a single porcelain bowl steaming gently. "Here we are, Dad," she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that made my teeth ache. "I made this just for you. It is a mushroom consommé. Very light, very easy to digest. You need something warm in your stomach after being confused all day." She placed the bowl in front of me. The smell hit me instantly, earthy, savory, and beneath it, a faint chemical acridity that a younger man might have missed or a trusting man might have ignored. But I was neither. I was a man who had just watched a video of this woman dropping poison into my water glass. "Thank you," I mumbled, staring at the dark liquid. "It looks good." I didn't pick up the spoon. I let my hand hover over it, shaking. I looked up at James. My son was sitting to my right, the place of honor. He wasn't eating. He wasn't looking at me. He was hunched over his phone, his thumb scrolling mindlessly through a social media feed, the blue light reflecting in his glasses. He looked pale, sweaty. He knew what was in the soup. He knew his wife was feeding his father a chemical lobotomy, and he couldn't even summon the courage to make eye contact. "James," I said, my voice raspy, Are you hungry?" He flinched, almost dropping the phone. No, Dad. I ate earlier. You just eat. You need the strength." Vanessa pulled out the chair to my left and sat down, leaning her elbows on the table, watching me with the intensity of a hawk watching a field mouse. "Go on, Bill," she urged. "It will get cold. And we have things to discuss." I picked up the spoon. My hand shook so badly the utensil clattered against the china. I saw a flash of annoyance cross Vanessa's face. She didn't want to nurse me. She wanted to drug me and be done with it. I am trying," I stammered. I lifted the spoon to my lips, feigning a sip but keeping my lips tight. I let the liquid touch my skin, burning slightly, then lowered the spoon. I needed a distraction. I needed 10 seconds of blindness. I started to cough. It was a dry, hacking sound that I forced from my diaphragm. I dropped the spoon. I grabbed the linen napkin with my left hand and brought it to my face, hacking loudly, my body convulsing forward over the table. "Oh, God." Vanessa sighed, standing up. "James, get him some water." James scrambled up, heading for the sideboard where the pitcher was. Vanessa turned her head to snap at him to hurry. That was my window. With my right hand, I reached into the wide cuff of my blazer. I had taped a heavy-duty Ziploc bag inside the sleeve earlier, the opening propped wide with a rigid piece of plastic collar stay. It was a crude mechanism, something I had improvised in the bathroom at the clinic, but it had to work. Still coughing into the napkin with my left hand, hiding my face and the bowl from their direct line of sight, I tilted the bowl toward my right wrist. I poured. The hot soup sloshed into the bag against my forearm. It burned. The heat seared my skin through the plastic, a sharp, biting pain that almost made me gasp for real. But I didn't flinch. I poured steady and fast, emptying 3/4 of the bowl into the hidden bag. I set the bowl back down just as James turned around with the water glass. I slumped back in the chair, wiping my mouth with the napkin, my right arm throbbing, the heavy hot bag swaying slightly inside my jacket. "I am sorry," I wheezed, taking the water from James. I swallowed the water greedily, washing away the taste of the lie. It went down the wrong pipe. Vanessa looked at the bowl. It was mostly empty. A look of pure, unadulterated triumph washed over her face. She didn't care that I had choked. She cared that the liquid was gone. "Good job, Bill," she said, sitting back down, her posture relaxing. "See, you are feeling better already." I nodded, breathing heavily, acting as though the exertion had drained me. I felt sleepy. "That is the medicine working," she said soothingly. "Or the nutrients. You just need rest. But before you go to sleep, Dad, there is one small thing." She reached under the table and pulled out a leather portfolio. She unzipped it, the sound loud in the quiet room. She slid a thick stack of documents across the mahogany surface toward me. "You need to sign these," she said. I squinted at the papers, letting my eyes lose focus. "What? What is this?" "It is the transfer documents, Bill," she said, her voice taking on that saccharine gaslighting tone again. "For the company, for the logistics division, remember? We talked about this last week. You said you were too tired to manage the fleet anymore. You said you wanted James to take over as CEO immediately. You promised." I stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking. I had never said that. In fact, last week I had told James that he wasn't ready, that he lacked the discipline to run the logistics arm. I had told him he needed another 5 years in operations. But here she was rewriting reality banking on the drugs she thought I had just ingested to make me compliant. I promised," I asked, looking at James. James finally looked up. His eyes were wet, terrified. He looked at Vanessa, then at me. He swallowed hard. "Yeah, Dad," he croaked. "You did. You said you wanted to retire. You said you wanted to spend more time with Mom. You told me to have the lawyers draw it up." He was lying to my face. My son. The boy I had taught to fish, the boy I had bailed out of college debts, the boy I had groomed to take my place one day. He was looking me in the eye and lying to steal my life's work. He wasn't just weak. He was broken. He had sold his integrity, his loyalty, his very soul to this woman who treated him like a lapdog. He had chosen the path of least resistance, and that path led directly over my grave. I looked down at the papers. The text swam before my eyes, not because of drugs, but because of tears I refused to shed. Transfer of ownership. Irrevocable power of attorney. It was a coup d'etat on bond paper. I don't remember," I whispered. "That is okay," Vanessa said, pushing a gold pen into my hand. Her fingers brushed mine, cold and dry. "You don't have to remember every detail. You just have to trust us. We are family. We are doing this for you. James will take care of the company. You just need to sign here and here and here. Then you can go to sleep." I held the pen. I felt the weight of it. I could sign. I could sign their fake document with my shaky hand, knowing that the document I had prepared with Blackwood would nullify it the moment the ink dried. I could give them this victory so they would lower their guard. Or I could wait. If I signed now, they might accelerate the timeline. If they had the company, they didn't need me alive. I let the pen drop from my fingers. It rolled across the table. I can't," I mumbled, letting my head loll forward. "My hand, it won't work. I am so tired. Tomorrow. I will sign tomorrow." Vanessa's face tightened. She looked like she was about to scream. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "Bill, focus," she hissed. You need to do this now. The lawyers are waiting. Mom, stop, James said, standing up. He looks like he is going to pass out. Let him sleep. The drugs. The soup needs time to settle. He will be more compliant in the morning. Vanessa glared at James, then back at me. She released my arm. She let out a huff of frustration. Fine, she spat. Tomorrow morning. First thing. But Bill, you promised. Don't forget again. I stood up, swaying on my feet, clutching the bag of burning soup against my ribs. I won't forget, I whispered. I shuffled out of the room, leaving them with their victory. I walked up the grand staircase, my legs heavy, my heart pounding a rhythm of war. I entered my bedroom and locked the door. I went straight to the bathroom and pulled the bag from my sleeve. The skin of my arm was red and blistered, but I didn't care. I poured the poisoned soup into a sterile container I had taken from the clinic. I looked at myself in the mirror. The old man was gone. The predator was back. They wanted the company. They wanted the money. They wanted me gone. Tomorrow they would get exactly what they deserved. Tomorrow I would sign their papers. And the day after that I would bury them. The silence of the house at 3 a.m. was heavy, a physical weight pressing against my eardrums. It wasn't the peaceful silence of a home at rest. It was the held breath of a crime scene. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of the house. I heard the refrigerator hum downstairs. I heard the wind rattle the window pane. I heard the settle of the foundation. But mostly, I listened for them. James was snoring in his old room down the hall, a sound that used to comfort me when he was a boy, but now just sounded like the arrogance of the ignorant. Catherine and Vanessa were in the master suite, sleeping in the bed that I had paid for under the roof I had built. They were sleeping the sleep of the victorious. They thought I was sedated. They thought the chemical cocktail in the soup was currently dissolving my cognitive functions, turning my brain into a pliable mush ready for molding. I sat up, ignoring the throbbing burn on my forearm where the hot liquid had scalded me. The pain was good. It was a tether to reality. It kept me sharp. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet making no sound on the plush carpet. I didn't turn on a light. I knew this house better than I knew the back of my own hand. I knew which floorboard creaked on the landing. I knew exactly how many steps it took to get to the west wing where Catherine had set up her home office. I moved like a ghost through the hallway. The moonlight filtered through the sheer curtains, casting long, skeletal shadows across the walls. I reached the door to the study. It was closed. I tried the handle gently. Locked. Of course. Catherine never used to lock this door. She used to leave it open, piles of fabric swatches and interior design magazines spilling out into the hall. But in the last 6 months, the door had been shut. She told me it was because I was making too much noise, that I was distracting her. Now I knew the truth. She wasn't designing living rooms. She was designing my demise. I didn't panic. I didn't need a key. I reached up to the top of the doorframe. There was a small ledge there, part of the ornate molding I had commissioned years ago. I ran my fingers along the dust until I felt cold metal. A spare key. I had put it there myself 5 years ago, after Catherine locked herself out once. She had probably forgotten it existed. I hadn't. I slid the key into the lock and turned it. The mechanism clicked, a sound that seemed as loud as a gunshot in the silent house. I froze, waiting. Nothing. No movement from the bedrooms. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me, engaging the lock again. I turned on the small penlight I had taken from the glove box of my car. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the room. It smelled of her perfume, and something else, the stale scent of secrets. Her desk was organized with military precision. This wasn't the desk of a scatterbrained socialite. This was the command center of a coup. I sat in her chair. It felt wrong, like sitting on a throne that had been usurped. I started with the drawers. The top one was innocent enough: stationery pens, a few bills. I went deeper. The bottom drawer was locked. I used the letter opener from the desktop to pry it open. The wood splintered with a soft crack, but the lock gave way. Inside there was a single thick accordion folder. It wasn't labeled. I opened it, and the first thing I saw was a glossy brochure. The cover featured a generic image of an elderly couple smiling at a sunset, but the paper quality was cheap, flimsy. I shined the light on the name. Shady Acres Assisted Living. I knew this place. It wasn't in the Hamptons. It wasn't even in New York. It was a budget facility 2 states over, a place known for Medicaid fraud and patient neglect. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. I flipped the brochure open. The rates were circled in red marker. $800 a month. Shared rooms. No private nurses. No specialized care. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. They weren't just stealing my $50 million. They were planning to dump me in a hellhole. They could have afforded the best care in the world with my money. They could have kept me in the guest house with a private medical team. But no, that would cost too much. That would eat into their inheritance. They wanted me gone, and they wanted it done as cheaply as possible. They valued my life at $800 a month. I dug deeper into the folder. Underneath the brochure was a legal document. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. It was a real estate contract. A bill of sale for this house. My house. The house I had built for my first wife. The house where James had taken his first steps. The closing date was set for Friday, 3 days from now. I scanned the document. The sale price was $3 million below market value. It was a fire sale. They were liquidating everything for cash fast. The buyer was a shell company I didn't recognize, probably a developer who would tear it down. I flipped to the signature page, and there it was. William Harrington. It was my signature. The loop of the W, the sharp cross of the H. It was perfect. If I hadn't known I was standing in the kitchen staring at the wall yesterday, I would have sworn I signed it. Catherine had been practicing. She had forged my name to sell the roof over my head while I was still sleeping under it. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just greed. This was hatred. You don't do this to someone you just want money from. You do this to someone you despise. She wanted to erase me. She wanted to scrub every trace of William Harrington from the earth and replace it with a bank balance. Then I found the calendar. It was a small leather-bound planner tucked into the back pocket of the folder. I opened it to this week. Today was Tuesday. Wednesday, notary arrives 9 a.m. Sign power of attorney. Thursday, liquidate joint accounts. Transfer to Cayman Holdings. Friday, house closing. And then Saturday. There was a red circle around the date. Inside the circle, in Catherine's neat cursive handwriting, were 2 words that stopped my heart. Transport package. Package. I was the package. Saturday. That was 4 days away. They weren't waiting for the dementia ruse to play out over months. They were accelerating the timeline. The moment I signed those papers tomorrow morning, the clock would start ticking. They would sell the house on Friday, and on Saturday, a van would come to take the package to a rotting facility 2 states away, where I would likely be sedated until I died of natural causes or neglect. I stared at the planner, my breathing shallow. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting for my money. I was fighting for my life. If I let them win tomorrow, if I signed the wrong papers, or if I didn't have my traps set perfectly, I would disappear. I would be a name on a file in a basement in New Jersey while they drank champagne on my yacht. I took out my phone and snapped photos of everything. The brochure, the contract with the forgery, the calendar with the dates. The evidence was damning. This proved premeditation. This proved conspiracy. This proved they weren't acting in my best interest. They were trafficking me. I put everything back. I arranged the papers exactly as I had found them. I pressed the broken wood of the drawer back together so it wouldn't look tampered with at a glance. I locked the office door and replaced the key on the ledge. I walked back to my bedroom, but I didn't go to sleep. I went into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at my reflection. The fear was gone. The shock was gone. They wanted a senile old man to sign away his life at 9 a.m. I would give them exactly that. I would tremble. I would cry. I would beg them to take care of me. I would sign their death warrant with a shaky hand and a grateful smile. I looked at the burn on my arm again. It was blistering now. Good. Pain is a great motivator. I lay back down in bed waiting for the sun to rise. I had 4 hours until the notary arrived. 4 hours until the performance of a lifetime. They thought Saturday was the end of the line. They didn't know that for them the world was going to end on Wednesday. The office of Marcus Blackwood was located on the 45th floor of a glass monolith in Midtown Manhattan. It was a space designed to intimidate, filled with chrome black leather and a panoramic view of the city that made human beings look like ants. I sat in a chair that cost more than my first car, staring at the man who had helped me dismantle 3 hostile takeovers in the 90s. Blackwood hadn't aged. He had just cured like expensive leather. He sat behind his desk, reading a thin file with a look of clinical detachment. He closed the folder and slid it across the obsidian desk toward me. "You are a walking chemistry set," Bill Blackwood said. His voice was dry, devoid of sympathy, which was exactly what I needed. "The lab results came back an hour ago. You have high concentrations of midazolam in your blood. It is a potent sedative usually used for anesthesia before surgery. It causes memory loss, confusion, and lethargy." I nodded slowly. That explained the fog. That explained why I couldn't remember driving. And Blackwood continued, leaning forward. "There is something else. A synthetic compound similar to psilocybin, but modified. It is a hallucinogen. In small doses, it causes visual distortions, paranoia, and disorientation." I clenched my fists in my lap. They weren't just knocking me out. They were trying to make me see things. They wanted me to rave about golf clubs that weren't there and sell houses to imaginary buyers. They were manufacturing madness. "Is it lethal?" I asked. "In these doses, probably not immediately," Blackwood said, "but combined with alcohol or if you drove a car. Yes, it could kill you, and long-term it would fry your neural pathways. They were lobotomizing you by the teaspoon." I looked at the report. It was a piece of paper, a medical analysis, but to me it was a declaration of war. It was proof that the woman I had married and the son I had raised were actively chemically assaulting me, so Blackwood said, steepling his fingers. "We have proof of poisoning. We have the video. We have the forged real estate contract you found. I can have the police at your house in 20 minutes. We can have them arrested for attempted murder, fraud, elder abuse. We can freeze the assets. You can file for an immediate divorce and get a restraining order. It is clean. It is safe." I stared out the window at the skyline. I thought about the humiliation in the restaurant. I thought about James's cowardly silence. I thought about Vanessa's smirk as she handed me the pen. "No," I said. Blackwood raised an eyebrow. "No, Bill, they are poisoning you. If I arrest them now, it becomes a media circus." I said, my voice low and hard. "They will get lawyers. They will claim I was self-medicating. They will say the video was taken out of context. They will say they were trying to help me manage my pain. Catherine is charming. She will cry on the stand. She might get a plea deal. She might walk away with a few years of probation and half my money in a divorce settlement because New York is a no-fault state." I turned back to him. "I don't want a settlement, Marcus. I don't want them to have a defense. I want them buried. I want them to lose everything. The money, their freedom, their reputation. I want them to wake up in a cell wondering how they walked into their own grave. Blackwood smiled. It was a shark's smile. What do you have in mind? I want you to draft a document, I said. A family asset management agreement. A what? Blackwood asked. It needs to look like a surrender, I explained. It needs to look like I am giving them exactly what they want. I want to transfer the control of the $50 million family trust to James and Catherine as joint trustees, effective immediately. Blackwood looked at me like I had actually lost my mind. Bill, if you sign that they can drain the accounts in an hour, they can wire that money to the Caymans and vanish. Not if the document is structured correctly, I said. I want you to write it so that they gain control, yes. But I want a clause. A specific binding clause buried in the fiduciary responsibilities section. A clause that states that by accepting the role of trustee, they accept full personal and criminal liability for the physical well-being of the grantor. Me. Go on, Blackwood, said his eyes narrowing in interest. I want the language to be explicit, I continued. By signing, they acknowledge that any deterioration in my health due to external factors, any evidence of neglect or any trace of non-prescribed substances in my system constitutes a direct breach of the trust. And here's the kicker, Marcus. I want a trigger clause. If a breach is detected, the trust doesn't just revert to me. It converts into a debt. A personal debt owed by the trustees to the estate. Blackwood started to laugh. A low, dry chuckle. You want to turn the $50 million into a liability. Exactly, I said. If they poison me after signing that paper, they aren't just committing a crime. They are committing fraud against a federal trust document. They are acknowledging that they are responsible for my health, which means the drugs in my blood become evidence of embezzlement and breach of contract. It moves the case from family court to federal court. It triples the prison time. And it gives us the power to seize every dime they have, even the money they didn't steal from me, to pay back the debt. And I added, I want a provision that says the trust becomes active only upon the notarized signature of all parties, and that the funds are released 24 hours after signing. That gives me a 24-hour window where they think they have won, where they will be celebrating, where they will be sloppy. Blackwood pulled a yellow legal pad toward him and started writing furiously. This is diabolical, Bill, he muttered. It is a Trojan horse. You are inviting them inside the walls just so you can burn the city down around them. Can you have it ready by 8 a.m. tomorrow, I asked. I will have it ready in 2 hours, Blackwood said. I will use the standard boilerplate for the first 20 pages, so they get bored reading it. I will bury the liability clause on page 22 right after the section on dividend yields. They never read the yield sections. They only look at the signature line. Make it look official, I said. Gold seal, heavy bond paper. Make it look like the keys to the kingdom. Blackwood paused, pen hovering over the paper. Bill, you know you have to go back there tonight. You have to survive one more night in that house. If they suspect anything, if they decide to accelerate the timeline. I touched the burn on my arm. It was throbbing under my jacket, a constant reminder of the hate that fueled me. I will be fine, Marcus, I said. I have the antidote. Antidote, adrenaline, I said, and the knowledge that tomorrow I am going to watch them sign their lives away. I stood up to leave. Blackwood stood as well and shook my hand. His grip was firm. Be careful, Bill, he said. You are playing a dangerous game. You are baiting wolves with your own throat. Wolves only attack when they sense weakness, I replied. They don't know that I am the hunter now. I took the elevator down to the lobby, my mind racing. I had the medical proof. I had the video evidence, and by tomorrow morning, I would have their signatures on a contract that criminalized their greed. I walked out into the Manhattan night. The air was cool. I hailed a cab. I didn't want to drive. I needed to focus. I needed to prepare for the performance of a lifetime. I had to go back to that house, eat their food, listen to their lies, and look at my son with love in my eyes, all while knowing that I was about to send him to prison for a decade. It was necessary. It was justice. But as the city lights blurred past the window, I felt a heavy stone settle in my heart. I wasn't just destroying them. I was destroying the memory of the family I thought I had. I was burning the photo album. But they struck first. They drew first blood. And I was going to make sure they bled last. The morning sun streamed through the bay windows of the breakfast nook, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was a beautiful golden light, the kind that usually signals a fresh start. But in the Harrington household, it felt like a spotlight on a stage. I sat at the table wrapped in a thick wool cardigan that was too warm for the season. I had chosen it deliberately. It made me look frail, shrinking my frame, making me appear as though my blood had thinned and my bones had grown cold. I stared at the empty plate in front of me, my hands trembling with a practiced rhythm. They were all there. Catherine was sipping her tea, her eyes darting to the grandfather clock in the hallway every 30 seconds. James was pacing the kitchen tiles, his shoes squeaking, a nervous energy radiating off him that smelled of sweat and desperation. Vanessa sat across from me, her posture perfect, her face a mask of calm, though her fingers were tapping a manic beat on the granite countertop. They were waiting for the kill. The doorbell rang at 9 o'clock sharp. It was the notary, a man sent by Blackwood named Mr. Henderson. He was a stiff, humorless man with a briefcase that looked like it contained nuclear codes. He entered the room and the air shifted. The game was live. I cleared my throat. It was a wet, weak sound. "Everyone, please sit down," I said, my voice barely a whisper. James stopped pacing and sat next to Vanessa. Catherine took the seat at the head of the table, usurping my position without even asking. It was a small slight, but it told me everything. She already considered herself the master of the house. I looked at them. I let my eyes fill with tears. It wasn't hard. I just had to think about the boy James used to be, the toddler who used to fall asleep on my chest, and realize that the man sitting across from me was waiting for me to die. The grief was real. I just weaponized it. I have been thinking, I stammered, letting a tear roll down my cheek. I wiped it away with a shaking hand. I don't know what is happening to me. Yesterday was a nightmare. I don't remember where I was. I don't remember what I did. I feel like I am losing pieces of myself every hour. Catherine reached out and covered my hand with hers. Her palm was warm, but her touch felt like ice. "Oh, Bill," she cooed, tilting her head. "It is terrifying, I know. But we are here. We won't let you fall." I know, I sobbed, letting my head drop. "That is just it. I am scared. I am scared I will do something terrible. I am scared I will lose the money. I am scared strangers will take advantage of me. I can't carry the weight of the company anymore. It is too heavy. The numbers, they just swim in my head." I looked up at James. He was leaning forward, his mouth slightly open. He looked like a starving man watching a feast being laid out. "I want to give it to you," I said. "All of it." Vanessa inhaled sharply. It was a sound of pure avarice. Her eyes widened, the pupils dilating. She looked like a predator that had just seen the throat of the prey exposed. "What do you mean, Dad?" James asked, his voice cracking. "I mean the trust," I said. "The $50 million. The voting rights for the logistics fleet. The portfolio. I want to transfer control to you and your mother. Today. Now. I want to know that it is safe with you before I forget who you are." Catherine squeezed my hand harder. It wasn't comfort. It was excitement. "Are you sure, darling?" she asked, though she was already signaling the notary with her eyes to open the briefcase. "That is a big step. We can just handle things informally if you want." "No," I insisted, letting panic creep into my voice. "No informalities. I want it legal. I want it done. I want to sign it away so I can rest." "I just want to rest, Catherine. I am so tired of fighting my own mind." Mr. Henderson placed the heavy stack of documents on the table. It was the contract Blackwood had drafted overnight. It was thick, bound in heavy cream paper with a blue legal backing. It looked official. It looked like power. "Here is the instrument of transfer," Mr. Henderson said, in a monotone voice. "It assigns full trusteeship and asset control to Catherine Harrington and James Harrington, effective upon notarization." Vanessa reached for the document before anyone else could. She pulled it toward her, flipping through the pages. She wasn't reading the clauses. She wasn't looking for the liability traps Blackwood had buried on page 22. She was looking for the numbers. She was looking for the assets. "It lists everything," she whispered, her eyes gleaming. "The Cayman accounts, the bonds, the fleet." "It is all there," I said weakly. Just promise me you will take care of me. Promise me I won't end up in some state facility." "We promise, Dad," James said quickly. "We will keep you right here. We will hire the best nurses." "Liar." I had seen the brochure for Shady Acres. I knew exactly where they intended to send me. But I nodded, acting grateful. "Thank you," I whispered. "Okay, let's do it." "Where do I sign?" Mr. Henderson flipped to the signature page. I picked up the pen. My hand shook violently. I made a show of struggling to grip it. I wanted them to see how weak I was. I wanted them to feel superior. I signed. My signature was a jagged scrawl, barely legible but legally binding. I pushed the papers toward Catherine. She signed with a flourish. She didn't hesitate for a second. She didn't read a single word of the text above her name. She just saw the dollar signs and signed her life away. Then she pushed it to James. He took the pen, but then he stopped. He looked up at me. There was a greed in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. It wasn't just the passive greed of receiving an inheritance. It was the active, hungry greed of a conqueror who wants to make sure he got every single spoil of war. Dad, James said, holding the pen above the paper. "What about the penthouse?" The room froze. The penthouse. My apartment in Manhattan. It wasn't part of the family trust. It was a separate asset, a property I had bought years ago and kept in my own name. It was worth $12 million. But more importantly, it was the headquarters for the Harrington Foundation. It was where my charity operated from. It was meant to be sold upon my death to fund scholarships for the children of my truck drivers. James knew this. He knew that apartment was sacred ground. "What about it?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It is not on the list," James said, tapping the document. "The trust covers the liquid assets and the company stock. But the deed to the penthouse isn't here." Vanessa looked up, her eyes narrowing. She hadn't noticed. She looked at James, then at me. "He is right," she said. "If you are transferring everything, Bill, you should transfer that too. It creates a tax liability if you keep it in your name. We can manage it better. We can optimize it." Optimize it. That meant sell it. They wanted to sell the charity headquarters and pocket the cash. They wanted to strip the scholarships from the children of the men and women who actually built this company. I felt a surge of rage so hot, it almost burned through my act. I wanted to reach across the table and slap the pen out of his hand. I wanted to scream that he wasn't worthy to step foot in that apartment, let alone own it. The penthouse was my legacy. It was the one good thing I was leaving behind. And he wanted to turn it into sports cars and designer handbags. But I looked at the document. Catherine had already signed. James hadn't. If I fought him now, if I showed resistance, he might get suspicious. He might back down. Or worse, they might realize I was lucid. The trap wasn't sprung yet. I needed his signature. I needed him to bind himself to the criminal liability clause. I looked at my son. I looked at the man who was willing to erase my charitable legacy for a quick payday. And in that moment, the last thread of fatherly affection I held for him snapped. It didn't break with a bang. It just withered and died. I forgot about the penthouse, I murmured, lowering my head. I am so confused. I thought I put it in. You didn't, James said, his voice hard. We need to add it. Can we add it now? He looked at Mr. Henderson. The notary looked at me. We can add an addendum, Mr. Henderson said calmly. A handwritten transfer of additional assets initialed by all parties. It is legal. Do it, Vanessa commanded. I looked at James. I let a tear fall onto the mahogany table. You really want the penthouse? I asked softly. It was for the foundation, James. For the driver's kids. Dad, James sighed, rolling his eyes. The foundation is a money pit. We can do more good if we manage the capital ourselves. We will donate to charity. Don't worry. Just let us handle it. He was lying again. He wouldn't donate a dime. Okay, I whispered. Okay, take it. Take it all. I don't want to worry about it anymore. Just take care of everything. Mr. Henderson wrote out the addendum on a fresh sheet of legal paper. Transfer of deed, 432 Park Avenue, Penthouse B. I signed it. I signed away my legacy. I signed away the last thing that was truly mine. But in doing so, I sealed their fate. James grinned. It was a wide, boyish grin that looked grotesque on his face. He grabbed the pen and signed the main document. Then he signed the addendum. He signed his name with a bold, looping script, pressing down hard on the paper. He pushed the stack to Vanessa. She signed as a witness and as a secondary trustee. It was done. Mr. Henderson stamped the documents with his seal. The sound was a dull thud like a gavel coming down. Congratulations, Mr. Henderson said, closing the briefcase. The trust is now active. The transfer of control is immediate. Catherine let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for years. She sat back in her chair, her entire demeanor changing. The mask of the concerned wife evaporated. Her posture straightened. Her eyes lost their fake warmth and became hard, glittering diamonds. She looked at the papers, then she looked at me. Well, she said, her voice dropping an octave, that is settled then. She stood up. She didn't offer to help me up. She didn't pat my hand. She walked over to the window and looked out at the estate that was now effectively hers. James stood up too. He high-fived Vanessa. Actually, high-fived her. We did it, he whispered. Vanessa looked at me. She wasn't smiling anymore. She looked bored. You should go to your room, Bill, she said. You look exhausted. And frankly, you smell like old soup. We have calls to make. We have to call the brokers. We have to call the banks. The shift was instantaneous. I was no longer the patriarch to be coddled. I was the furniture to be moved. They had the signature. They had the money. I was now just a loose end. I stood up, shaking, clutching the edge of the table. I am hungry, I said. Can I have some breakfast? Catherine turned from the window. She looked at me with pure disgust. The kitchen is closed, Bill, she said. The staff is busy preparing for the party tomorrow night. Go upstairs. There are crackers in your nightstand. Eat those, and don't come down until we call you. We don't want you wandering around while we are working. Party, I asked. Yes, a party, Vanessa said, gathering the papers. A celebration. We are inviting the board. We are inviting the partners. We are announcing the transition. It is going to be a big night for James." She looked at my stained cardigan. "And you are not invited," she added. "You will stay in your room. We will tell everyone you are too sick to attend. It is for the best. We don't want you embarrassing us." I looked at them. My family, my executioners. They were already celebrating. They were already spending the money. They thought they had won the lottery. They didn't know they had just signed a confession to federal fraud. "Okay," I whispered. I will go to my room." I shuffled toward the door. I didn't look back. I heard them laughing as I walked down the hall. I heard champagne corks popping. They were toasting to my demise at 10 in the morning. I walked up the stairs, my heart cold as stone. They wanted a party. They wanted to announce the transition to the board. Perfect. I would let them have their party. I would let them gather everyone who mattered in one room. And then I would show them exactly what kind of transition I had planned. I entered my bedroom and closed the door. I walked to the window and watched James dancing in the living room below. "Enjoy it, son," I whispered. "Enjoy the champagne, because it is the last thing you will ever taste as a free man." The heavy oak door clicked shut behind Mr. Henderson, the notary, and with that sound, the air in the room underwent a violent chemical change. It was as if the oxygen had been sucked out and replaced with something sharp and metallic. The warmth, the concern, the cloying sweetness that had suffocated me for the last 24 hours evaporated instantly. Catherine stood up from the table. She didn't look at me. She picked up the signed documents, tapping the edges on the granite surface to align them perfectly. She slid them into a leather folder with a snap that sounded like a neck breaking. "Well," she said, her voice flat and devoid of any emotion. "That is done." She turned to James. "Get the champagne from the cellar. The vintage Dom Perignon. Not the cheap stuff we serve guests." James grinned a loose, intoxicated smile. "You got it, Mom." I remained seated, my hands still trembling on the table, maintaining the charade. I looked up at Catherine, widening my eyes to simulate confusion and fear. "Catherine," I whispered. "What? What happens now? Can I go lie down in the den? I want to watch the news." She turned on me. Her face, usually so carefully composed, twisted into a sneer of pure revulsion. It was the face she usually reserved for the cleaning staff when they missed a spot of dust. "No," she snapped. "You cannot go to the den. You are not going to clutter up my living space with your drooling and your confusion." She pointed a manicured finger toward the hallway. "Go to your room, Bill. Upstairs. And stay there. Do not come down. Do not wander the halls. I don't want to see you until the transport arrives." "Transport?" I asked, letting my voice crack. "What transport?" We said we would hire nurses." "Here." Catherine laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Nurses here. Do you have any idea how much private nursing costs? Do you think I want strangers running around my house changing your diapers and smelling up the guest suites?" She leaned over the table, bringing her face close to mine. I could smell the coffee on her breath. "We found a lovely place for you, Bill. Shady Acres. It is very quiet. They specialize in difficult cases like yours. The van will be here tomorrow morning at 8. So go pack a bag. Small. You won't need suits where you are going. Tomorrow." They had moved the timeline up. They weren't waiting for Saturday anymore. They had the signature, they had the keys to the penthouse, and now they wanted the body disposed of immediately. They were efficient, I had to give them that. They were clearing the board before the ink was even dry. But James promised," I stammered, looking toward the cellar door where my son had disappeared. "James does what I tell him to do," Catherine hissed. "Now move. Get out of my sight." You look pathetic. I stood up slowly, leaning heavily on the chair for support. I didn't have to fake the heaviness in my legs. The sheer weight of her malice was enough to crush a younger man. I shuffled toward the door, my head bowed. As I reached the archway, Vanessa walked past me. She didn't step aside. She bumped my shoulder hard, knocking me off balance. I stumbled into the wall. "Watch it, old man," she muttered, not even glancing back. She walked into the kitchen, pulling her phone from her pocket. She dialed a number and put it on speaker as she poured herself a glass of water. I paused in the hallway, pressing myself against the wainscoting, hidden by the shadows. I needed this. I needed one last piece of audio to seal the coffin. "Hey, girl," Vanessa shouted into the phone. Her voice was bright, triumphant. A tinny voice answered. "Van, how did it go?" "It is done," Vanessa practically squealed. "We got it all. The trust, the company, even the penthouse. Can you believe it? He signed the penthouse over on a whim. He is so far gone he didn't even know what day it was." "Oh my God," the friend replied. "That is amazing. So you are rich now. I am wealthy," Vanessa corrected, laughing. "And the best part, we are getting rid of the dead weight tomorrow. We are shipping the old man off to some facility in Jersey in the morning. Jersey U. I know, right, but it is cheap. And once he is gone, the house is ours. James and I are moving into the master suite. I am going to burn those hideous curtains of his." I listened, my hand sliding into my cardigan pocket. My fingers curled around the small, cold metal of the digital recorder. The red light was steady. It was catching every word. So the friend asked, "What is the first purchase?" Vanessa leaned against the counter. I could hear the smile in her voice. "I am looking at the configurator right now," she said. "The Porsche 911 Turbo S, in acid green. I want something loud. I want everyone to know I have arrived. Finally, I don't have to beg for an allowance. Finally, the old bastard is out of the way." I clenched the recorder so hard the plastic creaked. Acid green. She wanted a car the color of bile to celebrate the destruction of my life. James came back up from the cellar holding a dusty bottle. He walked past me as if I were a coat rack. "Who are you talking to?" he asked Vanessa. "Just Sarah," Vanessa said, telling her the good news. "Pop the cork, baby. We have celebrating to do." "Celebrating too." James popped the cork. The sound ricocheted through the hallway like a gunshot. "To us," James said. "To us," Vanessa echoed. "And to the end of the William Harrington era." They clinked glasses. I turned and walked toward the stairs. I didn't make a sound. I climbed the steps one by one, feeling the burn of the poison on my arm, the weight of the recorder in my pocket, and the cold, hard resolve in my gut. They thought tomorrow morning was the end. They thought a van would come and take me away to rot in a shared room in New Jersey. They were already spending the money. They were already redecorating. They had no idea that the William Harrington era wasn't ending. It was just entering its most violent chapter. I reached my bedroom and closed the door. I walked over to the calendar on my wall. I looked at tomorrow's date, the day of the party, the day they planned to announce their victory to the world. I took a black marker from my desk. I drew a thick, dark line through the date. "You want a celebration," I whispered to the empty room. "I will give you a celebration." I sat on the edge of the bed and waited for the night to fall. I had a lot of work to do. I had to coordinate with Blackwood. I had to call Giovanni. I had to set the stage. They told me not to linger. They told me to go to my room. Tomorrow, when I walked out of this room, and I wouldn't be the confused old man they pushed around. I would be the CEO. I would be the judge. And I would be the executioner. Let them drink their champagne. Let them dream of Porsches. Tomorrow, they wake up in hell. The bass of the music vibrated through the floorboards of my bedroom, a rhythmic thumping that felt like a heartbeat accelerating out of control. It was 8 o'clock in the evening. Downstairs in the grand ballroom I had built for my first wife, my family was hosting a gala. They called it a celebration of new leadership. I called it a wake for a man who wasn't dead yet. They had locked my door from the outside. I heard the click of the deadbolt at 5 p.m. right after Catherine brought me a tray of dry toast and water, telling me to rest up for the big move tomorrow. She had looked at me with pity, shaking her head as if I were a sick dog that needed to be put down. But locks only work if you don't own the building. I walked to the walk-in closet. I pushed aside the rows of gray cardigans and sweatpants they had left for me to wear in the nursing home. At the very back inside a garment bag I had instructed the housekeeper to hide weeks ago was my armor. It wasn't a suit of chainmail. It was a bespoke tuxedo tailored on Savile Row midnight blue with a black satin lapel. I put on the crisp white shirt. I fastened the onyx studs. I tied the bow tie with hands that were as steady as a surgeon's. The drugs were gone from my system, flushed out by adrenaline and hate. I looked in the mirror. The hunched, trembling old man was gone. Staring back at me was William Harrington, the man who had stared down union bosses and hostile takeovers. The predator had returned. I walked to the bedroom door. I didn't rattle the handle. I reached into the pocket of my tuxedo trousers and pulled out the master skeleton key. I had kept it on a chain around my neck for 30 years, hidden beneath my undershirts. They never looked there. They never thought to search the victim. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a smooth, satisfying click. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The noise of the party surged up the stairs, laughter, the clink of crystal, the murmur of expensive conversation. I walked to the landing of the grand staircase. Below me the scene was a masterpiece of opulence. 200 guests filled the room. I recognized them all. There was the chairman of the bank that held my accounts. There were my golf partners. There were the board members who had shaken my hand last week and were now drinking my wine while my son plotted my demise. In the center of the room, standing on a raised platform near the jazz band, were the usurpers. James was holding a glass of scotch, laughing too loudly at a joke made by a senator. He looked flushed, arrogant, the king of a kingdom he hadn't conquered, but stolen. Vanessa was draped in a gold sequined gown that hugged her figure, a diamond necklace, my mother's necklace, glittering at her throat. She looked like a trophy that had learned to bite. And Catherine, she was moving through the crowd like a shark in a koi pond, accepting congratulations, touching arms, whispering lies about my health. She looked radiant. She looked relieved. I took a breath. This was it. I started to descend the stairs. I didn't rush. I walked with the slow, deliberate cadence of a man who owns the ground he walks on. My dress shoes made a sharp, authoritative sound on the marble steps. Click, click, click. The first person to notice me was the jazz singer. She faltered mid-note, her eyes widening as she looked up. The piano player followed her gaze and stopped playing. The silence spread outward from the stage like a ripple in water. Conversations died. Heads turned. Glasses were lowered. One by one, 200 faces turned upward. I saw the confusion in their eyes. They had been told I was bedridden. They had been told I was senile, drooling, violent. They expected a ghost. Instead, they got the CEO. James froze. His glass tilted, spilling amber liquid onto his shoes, but he didn't notice. His mouth hung open, a slack-jawed portrait of terror. Vanessa grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his tuxedo jacket, her face draining of color. But it was Catherine's reaction that I savored the most. She was mid-laugh with the senator's wife when the silence hit her. She turned slowly. When she saw me standing halfway down the stairs, immaculate in my tuxedo, looking down at her with cold, clear eyes, she dropped her champagne flute. It shattered on the floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silent room. I reached the bottom of the stairs. The crowd parted for me instinctively, creating a wide path toward the stage. I walked through them. I didn't look left or right. I kept my eyes locked on my family. "Bill," someone whispered. I think it was my old CFO. He sounded terrified. I stepped onto the platform. The band scrambled out of my way. I took the microphone from the stand. I tapped it once. Thump. The sound boomed through the speakers. Catherine snapped out of her shock. She rushed toward the stage, her heels clicking frantically. Her face was a mask of panic, her eyes wide and wild. She waved her hands at the guests, trying to regain control of the narrative she had so carefully constructed. "Oh God," she cried out, her voice shrill and trembling. "Don't look, everyone. Please. He is having an episode." She scrambled up the steps of the stage, reaching for me. "Bill, stop," she hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper as she got close. "What are you doing? Get back to your room. You are embarrassing us." Then she turned back to the crowd, putting on a tragic, tearful face. "I am so sorry, everyone," she wailed. "The dementia. It comes and goes. He thinks it is 20 years ago. He doesn't know where he is. Please, James, help me get your father back to bed before he hurts himself." James snapped out of his trance. He rushed forward, emboldened by his mother's lie. "Come on, Dad," he said, his voice shaking but loud. "Let's go upstairs. You are confused. You need your medicine." He reached for my arm. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him. I looked at him with the full weight of 40 years of fatherhood, with the memory of teaching him to ride a bike, and the memory of watching him sign my death warrant yesterday morning. I shifted the microphone to my left hand. With my right hand, I backhanded him across the face. It wasn't a wild swing. It was a short, sharp, controlled strike. It connected with a crack that silenced the few people who were still whispering. James stumbled back, holding his cheek, staring at me in disbelief. Catherine gasped, covering her mouth. I brought the microphone to my lips. My voice was steady, deep, and resonant. It was the voice that had commanded boardrooms and terrified competitors. "I am not confused, Catherine," I said. The speakers amplified my voice, filling every corner of the room. "And I don't need any more of your medicine. I think I have had quite enough of your special soup." The crowd murmured. They sensed the danger. This wasn't a senile outburst. This was an execution. Vanessa stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. She forced a laugh, a brittle, high-pitched sound. "Oh, Dad," she said, smiling at the guests. "See, he is aggressive. The doctor warned us about the aggression. It is the Alzheimer's. It makes them violent. We really need to get him to the facility." I turned my gaze to her. She flinched under the spotlight. "There is no Alzheimer's, Vanessa," I said calmly. "And there is no facility. Not for me, anyway." I reached into my inner jacket pocket. I pulled out a small silver remote control. It was connected to the projector system I had instructed Giovanni to set up behind the main screen earlier that afternoon. I looked out at the sea of faces. My friends. My colleagues. My betrayers. "You came here tonight to celebrate a transition of power," I said. "You came to toast the new management. Well, I don't want to disappoint you." Catherine lunged for the remote. "Give me that," I stepped back effortlessly. "I think it is time we all saw exactly how this transition was negotiated," I said. I pressed the button. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. The massive screen behind me, which had been displaying a slideshow of smiling family photos, went black for a second. Then the grainy black and white footage from the VIP room at the Gilded Fork flickered to life. Catherine froze. James turned pale. Vanessa stopped breathing. The show had begun. The lights in the ballroom seemed to flicker as the screen went black, leaving the afterimage of their treachery burned into the retinas of every person in the room. The silence was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket that smothered even the ambient noise of the air conditioning. It was the kind of silence that usually follows a gunshot. "You see," I said, my voice soft now, almost conversational, amplified by the speakers to reach every corner of the room. "You thought you came here to celebrate a retirement. You thought I was stepping down because I was sick, because I was old, because I was losing my mind." I walked to the very edge of the stage, looking down at James. He was on his knees now, his hands clamped over his ears, as if he could physically block out the reality of what he had done. "I am not sick," I said, my voice hardening. "I was poisoned, systematically, chemically, by my wife, by my son, by the woman who calls herself my daughter." I reached into my breast pocket and pulled out the folded lab report Blackwood had handed me just 24 hours ago. I held it up, the paper stark white under the stage lights. "This is a toxicology report from yesterday morning," I announced. "It confirms high levels of midazolam and synthetic hallucinogens in my blood. The exact cocktail Vanessa described in that video. They didn't just plan it. They did it. They fed me poison at my own dinner table in my own soup while smiling to my face." A ripple of sound moved through the crowd. It wasn't conversation. It was a low, ugly murmur of revulsion. It was the sound of a mob realizing they had been dining with monsters. People began to physically recoil from Catherine and Vanessa, stepping back, creating a widening circle of isolation around them. They were pariahs in gold and silk. "But that is not all," I continued, relentless. "Yesterday they tricked me into signing over the company. They told me I promised. They used the confusion from the drugs to gaslight me into believing I was losing my memory. They stole my legacy with a pen and a lie." I looked at Catherine. She was trembling so violently, her diamond earrings rattled against her neck. She looked like a cornered animal, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an ally, looking for an escape. She found neither. "You wanted to send me to a home, Catherine," I said, projecting my voice to the back of the room. "Shady Acres, $800 a month. Oh. You were going to lock me away in a shared room and throw away the key so you could spend my money on parties like this." I swept my hand across the room, gesturing to the opulent floral arrangements, the crystal towers, the wasted extravagance. "Well," I said, "the party is over." Catherine finally found her voice. It was a shrill, desperate scream that cracked in the middle. "He is lying," she yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "He is crazy. The doctor said so. He doctored the tape. James, tell them he is insane." She turned on James, grabbing him by the lapels of his tuxedo, shaking him violently. "Tell them," she shrieked. "Tell them it isn't true." James looked up. His face was a mask of ruin wet with tears and mucus. He looked at the blank screen, then at me, then at the crowd of people, his peers, his investors, his friends, staring at him with unmasked disgust. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was broken. The weight of his own voice on that tape, asking if I would die, had crushed whatever resolve he had left. "He can't tell them, Catherine," I said, "because he knows. He knows what he signed yesterday." I pulled a copy of the trust agreement from my inner pocket. I unfolded it slowly, the crisp paper crinkling in the microphone. "Yesterday morning, my family signed this document," I told the crowd. "They thought they were signing a deed to my empire. But they didn't read the fine print. They were too greedy. They were too eager to bury me." I held the paper up to the light. "This document contains a clause," I explained. "A clause that states if any evidence of foul play or poisoning is found in my system, the trustees accept full criminal liability. By signing this, they didn't just steal my company. They signed a confession. They legally acknowledged that if I was drugged, they did it." The gasp this time was different. It wasn't shock. It was awe. The bankers in the room, the lawyers, the sharks, they understood the maneuver. They understood the brutal elegance of the trap. I saw the chairman of the bank nod slowly in grim respect. "You signed your own arrest warrants," I said to the three of them. Vanessa fell to the floor. Her legs simply gave out. She sat in a pile of gold sequins, sobbing into her hands, her mascara running in black streaks down her face. The acid green Porsche was gone. The penthouse was gone. The life she had been willing to kill for had evaporated into mist. Catherine stood alone. Her friends had retreated to the walls. Her allies looked at the floor. She was the queen of a burning kingdom. She looked up at me, and for the first time I saw the fear I had wanted to see. Not the fear of getting caught, but the fear of total annihilation. "Bill," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please." "Please what?" I asked. "Please don't send you to Shady Acres. Please don't poison your soup. Please don't erase your life." I shook my head. "It is too late for please, Catherine. You didn't show mercy when I was stumbling through the hallway yesterday. You didn't show mercy when you forged my name on the house deed. You wanted me gone." I looked toward the main double doors of the ballroom. "And now you are going to get your wish. I am leaving, but I am not going alone." The doors swung open with a heavy thud that resonated through the floorboards. The silence broke. The sound of heavy boots marching on marble filled the room. Lawyer Blackwood walked in first, his face set in a grim line, holding a briefcase. Behind him was the chief of police, and behind him, wearing navy blue windbreakers with 3 yellow letters that every criminal fears, were 6 agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. "Catherine Harrington, James Harrington, Vanessa Harrington," the lead agent boomed, his voice carrying over the sobbing of my daughter-in-law. I lowered the microphone. My part was done. I had played the fool, I had played the victim, and now I had played the executioner. I watched as the agents moved in. I watched the handcuffs come out, the steel glinting under the chandelier. I watched the metal snap around the wrists of the woman who had vowed to love me until death. She had tried to rush the until death part. Now she would have a long time to think about it. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just stood on the stage, a lonely figure in a tuxedo, watching my family being dragged away from the party they had thrown for my funeral. The movie was over. The credits were rolling, and they were going to prison. The guests stood frozen, their champagne glasses forgotten in their hands. They looked at me with a mixture of terror and pity. They didn't know what to say. There is no etiquette book for a moment like this. I tapped the microphone one last time. "Enjoy the buffet," I said. "I paid for it." Then I put the mic down and walked off the stage. Catherine lunged at me. It was a primal, desperate movement, stripping away the last veneer of the sophisticated socialite she had pretended to be for 15 years. Her face was contorted, her makeup streaked with sweat, her hands hooked into claws reaching for the microphone in my hand. She wanted to silence me. She wanted to stop the flow of truth that was drowning her, but she forgot who she was dealing with. She saw an old man. She forgot she was attacking a man who had worked on the docks before he owned them. I stepped back. It was a simple, fluid motion, a sidestep I had learned in boxing gyms a lifetime ago. She missed me by inches. Her momentum carried her forward, and she stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the podium. Her high heel snapped with a dry crack. She fell to her knee, gasping, her expensive gown tearing at the hem. It was a pathetic sight. The queen of the manor reduced to a heap of gold silk and desperation on the floor. The room was silent. Not a whisper. Not a clink of a glass. 200 of the city's elite stared at her, then at me. I looked down at her. I didn't feel pity. I felt the cold, hard satisfaction of a balance sheet finally zeroing out. "You think I am weak, Catherine," I said into the microphone. My voice boomed through the ballroom, steady and unforgiving. "You think because I have gray hair my mind is soft. You think because I walk slowly I cannot see you coming. You judged me by the shell, but you forgot about the steel underneath." I looked out at the crowd, then back to my son, who was still kneeling on the floor, staring at the screen where his crime was playing on a loop. I built this empire from nothing, I roared. My voice cracked with the intensity of the rage I had been suppressing for 3 days. I was driving trucks through blizzards while you were still learning to walk James. I was negotiating with cartels and unions while you were in private school spending my money. I built the roof over your head. I paid for the clothes on your back. And you thought you could take it from me with a few drops of poison and a pen. You thought I was the prey, I said, lowering my voice to a dangerous growl. But I was never the prey. I was just waiting for you to step into the cage. Catherine tried to stand up. She looked wild. He is lying, she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. He is the one who is crazy. Get him off the stage. Someone help me. She looked toward the security guards I employed. They didn't move. They stood by the doors, their arms crossed, staring at her with stone faces. They knew who signed their paychecks. No one is going to help you, Catherine, I said, because they know what you are now. But don't worry. I didn't come here alone either. I nodded toward the main entrance. The heavy double doors, which had been closed to keep the party in, swung open with a definitive heavy thud. The sound of heavy boots marching on marble echoed through the hall. It was a rhythmic, militaristic sound that cut through the tension like a knife. Marcus Blackwood walked in first. He wasn't smiling. He looked like the Grim Reaper in a 3-piece suit holding a black leather briefcase that contained their doom. Flanking him was the chief of police, a man I had known for 20 years, looking grim. But it was the men behind them that made the air leave the room. 6 agents wearing navy blue windbreakers with yellow letters emblazoned on the back. FBI. The crowd parted. It was like the Red Sea splitting. Guests scrambled back, knocking over chairs, spilling drinks, desperate to distance themselves from the blast radius. Catherine froze. Her eyes went to the letters on the jackets. FBI. She looked at me confused. Why were they here? This was a family dispute. This was a local matter. She didn't understand. She didn't read the contract. Blackwood walked up to the stage. He placed the briefcase on the edge of the platform and opened it. He pulled out the document they had signed yesterday morning. The gold seal caught the stage lights. Catherine Harrington. James Harrington. Vanessa Harrington, Blackwood announced. His voice wasn't amplified, but it carried to every corner of the silent room. You are under arrest. For what? Vanessa screamed. She was standing now, clutching her diamond necklace, as if it could protect her. This is insane. We didn't do anything. He is the one who is sick. Agent Miller, the lead federal agent, stepped forward. He held up a pair of handcuffs. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder wire fraud and federal trust fraud, Miller said. Fraud. James whimpered. Yesterday morning, Blackwood explained, holding up the contract. You signed a family asset management agreement. You signed it willingly. You signed it in front of a notary. By signing this document, you assumed full fiduciary and criminal liability for the physical well-being of William Harrington. He paused, letting the words sink in. You acknowledged that any harm that came to him, any poison found in his blood, would constitute a breach of federal trust laws. And we have the toxicology report from this morning. It shows lethal levels of sedatives. You signed a contract accepting responsibility for his health while simultaneously poisoning him. That turns your little family plot into a federal racketeering case. You didn't just try to kill him. You used the banking system and interstate commerce to do it. The color drained from Vanessa's face. She understood now. She looked at the contract as if it were radioactive. No, she whispered. We didn't read it. Ignorance of the law is no excuse, I said from the stage. And ignorance of a contract you signed to steal $50 million is just stupidity. The agents moved in. 2 of them grabbed Catherine. She screamed. It was a raw animal sound. She tried to pull away her nails, scratching at the agent's arm. "Get your hands off me," she yelled. "I am Catherine Harrington. I own this house." "Not anymore," I said. The handcuffs clicked. The sound was final. They hauled her up, her one broken heel dragging on the floor. 2 more agents approached Vanessa. She didn't fight. She just started crying loud, ugly sobs. "My baby," she wailed, looking at James. "James, do something. Tell them." James was on his knees. An agent pulled him up by his armpits. He looked at me. His face was wet with tears and snot. He looked like a child who had broken a window, not a man who had tried to kill his father. "Dad," he pleaded. "Dad, please. I didn't mean it. She made me. They made me do it. I am your son." I looked down at him from the stage. I looked at the boy I had carried on my shoulders. I looked at the man who had poured poison into my soup and watched me drink it. "You are not my son," I said softly. "My son died the moment you chose her over me. The moment you chose the money over my life." "Dad." "Please," he screamed as they dragged him backward. "I don't want to go to prison. I am scared." "You should have thought about that before you signed the papers, James," I said. I watched as they were marched out. Catherine was still screaming threats. Vanessa was sobbing about her reputation. James was begging. The guests watched in horrified fascination. This wasn't just a scandal. This was a Greek tragedy playing out in the Hamptons. Blackwood snapped the briefcase shut. He looked up at me and nodded. It was done. The trap had sprung. The contract was ironclad. The evidence was irrefutable. They weren't just going to jail for the night. With the federal charges, the attempted murder, and the financial fraud, they were going away for decades. I stood alone on the stage. The music was gone. The family was gone. The illusion was gone. I looked at the empty champagne glass Catherine had dropped. It lay shattered on the floor, shards of crystal glittering under the lights. It was over. I had won. I had kept my empire. I had kept my life. But as I looked at the empty doorway where my son had just been dragged out in chains, I realized the price of victory. I was the last Harrington standing, and the house was very, very quiet. I tapped the microphone one last time. "The show is over," I said to the stunned room. "Go home. Kiss your children. Check your bank accounts. And never ever underestimate the old man in the corner." I placed the microphone on the stand. I straightened my tuxedo jacket. And I walked off the stage not as a victim, but as a survivor. I walked past the silent guests out the back door and into the cool night air. I had a dinner reservation with Giovanni, and for the first time in years, I was going to enjoy my meal without wondering what was in it. The air in the federal detention center smelled of industrial cleaner and stale sweat, a sharp contrast to the expensive cologne and champagne that had filled the air the last time I saw my son. I sat on the metal stool, the cold seeping through my trousers, waiting. On the other side of the thick, scratched plexiglass, the door buzzed open. James walked in. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His hair was unwashed, his face covered in a patchy stubble. He looked 20 years older than the man who had raised a glass to my demise 48 hours ago. He sat down, his handcuffs clanking against the metal ledge. He didn't pick up the phone at first. He just looked at me, his eyes red and swollen. I picked up the receiver. He followed suit, his hands trembling. "Dad," he cracked. The word was a sob. "Dad. Thank God you came. You have to get me out of here. It is a mistake. The lawyers, they say I am looking at 20 years. You have to stop this. You have to tell them it was a misunderstanding." I looked at him. I looked for the boy I had taught to tie his shoes. I looked for the young man I had sent to business school. I found neither. I only saw a stranger who had tried to erase me. "There is no misunderstanding, James," I said calmly. "The toxicology report is clear. The contract you signed is clear. It wasn't me, he pleaded, leaning forward, his breath fogging the glass. It was them. It was Mom. It was Vanessa. They made me do it. They said you were sick anyway. They said it was mercy. I didn't want to hurt you. I am your son. I am your flesh and blood. I listened to him beg. I listened to him throw his wife and mother under the bus without a second thought. It was pathetic. It was the final confirmation that there was nothing left to save. You were not coerced, James, and I said, my voice steady. You were not hypnotized. You had a choice. Every single day for the last 6 months, you had a choice. You could have come to me. You could have warned me. You could have stopped them. I paused, letting the weight of the truth settle on him. But you didn't, I continued. You looked at the numbers. You looked at the inheritance. And you made a calculation. You decided that my life was worth less than your lifestyle. You chose the money over your father. Dad, no, he wept. Yes, I said. You chose the money. And now you have neither. I stood up. The metal stool scraped against the floor. What do you mean? James asked, panic rising in his voice. The trust. The trust is dissolved, I said. I met with Blackwood this morning. I am liquidating everything. The company, the properties, the penthouse you wanted so badly. Every single dime is being transferred into an irrevocable charitable foundation. It will fund scholarships. It will build hospitals. It will do the good in the world that you refused to do. James stared at me, his mouth open in horror. He wasn't mourning the loss of his father. He was mourning the loss of the fortune. You can't, he whispered. That is my money. It was never your money, I said. It was mine. And now it belongs to the world. I started to hang up the phone. Dad, wait, James screamed, slamming his hand against the glass. You can't leave me here. I don't have a lawyer. The accounts are frozen. Who is going to defend me? I looked at him one last time. I felt a pang of sadness, deep and old, but it was quickly replaced by the cold clarity of justice. Good luck with the public defender, son, I said. I hung up the phone. I didn't wait for his response. I didn't watch him scream. I turned my back on the glass, on the orange jumpsuit, and on the man who used to be my son. I walked toward the heavy steel door, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel the weight of the knife in my back. I was light. I was free. 6 months have passed since the flashing lights of the federal convoy faded from my driveway, leaving behind a silence that finally felt like peace. I am sitting at the same corner table at the Gilded Fork, where I used to dine alone, surrounded by sycophants and liars. Tonight, the chair across from me isn't empty, and it isn't filled by someone waiting for me to die. Giovanni is sitting there. He isn't standing at attention with a towel over his arm anymore. He is wearing a suit. I bought a 49% stake in the restaurant last month and made him the operating partner. He is the only man who told me the truth when it mattered, and in my world, loyalty pays better than dividends. I reach for my wine glass. It is a 1982 Bordeaux, a vintage I have been saving for a special occasion. I hold the crystal up to the warm light of the chandelier. The liquid is deep dark and perfectly clear. I watch it swirl. I don't look for sediment. I don't sniff for the bitter tang of chemicals. I don't wonder if this sip will be the one that erases my memory or stops my heart. I just smell the oak and the fruit. I take a long, slow sip. It tastes like victory. It tastes like freedom. I think about them sometimes, usually when the evening gets quiet. I wonder what they are doing right now. Catherine and Vanessa are currently residents of the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. The plea deals fell apart when the extent of the financial fraud came to light. They are serving 20 years each. They wanted to live together in the lap of luxury, sharing my wealth. Now they share a 6x8 cell and a stainless steel toilet. They finally got their wish to be inseparable. And James. My son avoided prison by turning state's evidence against his mother and wife, a final, desperate act of cowardice that saved his physical freedom but cost him everything else. He is on probation for 5 years. He works the night shift at a hardware store in Queens, stocking shelves for minimum wage. He lives in a studio apartment that is smaller than the bathroom he grew up with. The trust is gone. The foundation owns it all. He wanted to inherit the world without lifting a finger. Now he has to work just to buy a sandwich. I don't hate him anymore. I just don't know him. People always tell you that blood is thicker than water. They tell you that family is sacred, that you have to forgive, that you have to endure abuse because of a shared last name. They tell you that you cannot turn your back on your own flesh and blood. They are wrong. Sometimes family is just biology. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones sharpening the knife. I learned the hard way that you cannot heal a limb that has turned gangrenous. You cannot negotiate with a tumor. You cannot love a parasite into becoming a partner. To survive, you have to cut it out. You have to sever the connection, cauterize the wound, and walk away. It hurts. It leaves a scar that aches when it rains. But it is the only way to stay alive. I look at Giovanni. He raises his glass to me. I smile, and for the first time in years, the smile reaches my eyes. I am William Harrington. I am 70 years old. I have lost a wife and a son, but I have regained myself. I am alone, but I am not lonely. I place my glass on the table and signal for the check. My life isn't over. It has just begun. We spend our lives building fortunes for our families, thinking that provision equals love. But I learned the hardest truth in the darkest way: you cannot buy loyalty, and you cannot inherit character. If you ever have to question whether the people around you love you or your wallet, you already have your answer. Do not be afraid to be the villain in their story if it means being the hero of your own. Protect yourself first, because at the end of the day, the only person guaranteed to save you from the wolves is the one staring back at you in the mirror. If you enjoyed seeing justice served cold, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where the underdog bites back.